Okay, everybody, welcome back. I hope you had a great time sharing some information about yourself, why you're studying communication, what you'd like to do with communication, and some of the communication habits and favorites, what you like to do with mass media today. And hopefully you've learned a little bit about each other. What I want to do now is talk about, provide a preview of the textbook and also what we're going to be doing throughout this semester. I find the easiest way to get acclimated with a textbook is to look at the table of contents. So what I've done here is broken up the table of contents by chapter, and we'll take a look at what we're going to be looking at or studying or discussing throughout the semester, chapter by chapter. And then the last slide is some other things that we'll be working on throughout the semester that outside of the media ethics issues and cases textbook. So the first semester, and the chapter that you will have due to read for Thursday is an introduction to ethical decision making. And what you will read is talking about why we care about ethics today, why we care about ethics as communication students, why we care about ethics as potential public relations professionals, journalists, videographers, podcasters, things like that, why we care about ethics when we are looking through our Facebook posts, while we're looking through our Facebook feeds, while we're looking at Twitter or Instagram. This leads with an overview of recent cases in mass media, recent ethical cases in the mass media. And the first couple of pages in the textbook in this chapter 1 talks about, highlights some of the recent ethical issues facing mass media professionals and us as mass media consumers. We're going to learn about 2 questions that drive professional media ethics, and we will be referring often to those two questions that drive these ethical dilemmas. And we will be introduced to our first tool in the toolbox, that's Box Model. We'll talk about Box Model, the foundations of what Bach talked about, and then her 3-step process for deploying this tool to make a consistent and rational ethical decision. We will talk about the philosophies of ethics, and we will be referring to these philosophies throughout the semester. And these are things that you need to know. So as you're reading chapter 1, needing to know about Aristotle, Kant, Ross, and their philosophies of ethics. And then finally, you will read about how to read a case study, because we will be referring to case studies throughout the semester in the textbook, and we will be bringing in case studies from mass media, everyday mass media, and using those case studies to talk about the ethical dilemmas facing both media producers, media message producers, and also us as consumers of mass media. And then I will have you break out into groups on Thursday and talk about the case study that they present after chapter 1. Chapter 2 is strategic communication. Does client advocate mean consumer adversary? We will talk about chapter 2 is information ethics. A profession seeks the truth. and we will talk about the foundation of truth and how truth over time has changed, what facts are. The world was once flat. It is no longer flat. We know that it is no longer flat because science has told us it is no longer flat. So things that were true before are no longer true because we know more about the world. Things that may be true today may not be true tomorrow because we are learning more and more about the things in the world. And so we will talk about the constructions of the truth, the history of truth, and walk through the phases of what we know about the truth. We will deal with postmodernism and how the truth is often manufactured, and the truth is filtered through our experience and our education, and how reality is maybe different from one person to another. Does who's talking matter? Does one reporter reporting on the presidential campaign on Fox News it influences how they report on the campaign versus how a reporter from MSNBC or CNN covers the same, possibly the same candidate in the presidential campaign. So does who's talking matter? We will peel back that onion and talk about that and the ethical dimensions of reporting the news or reporting the truth in the mass media. How do journalists manufacture the truth? How do television reporters, newspaper journalists, radio journalists, social media professionals, how do they come at the truth and create the reality that they want to create when they're telling us about the news of the day? And then we will define what the news is and how newspaper editors define the news on a day-to-day basis. Chapter 3 is strategic communication. Does client advocate mean consumer adversary? If you read Harry Potter, you know what the room of requirement is, right? So in the metaphor here is that technology or the channel, the mass media channel, influences how we look at the news, how we look at the message being portrayed on the mass media. If it is a good message, is it because we're looking for a good message? If it's a bad message, is it because the people who are providing that message wants to portray a bad message or a negative message, I should say? We will talk about powerful effects theory and cognitive dissonance, two theories in mass media communication and mass media studies, and how those powerful effects theory and cognitive dissonance influence the way that we perceive and digest the messages in mass media. We will presented in this text some case studies with the TARES test and look at some advertisements and whether they meet the requirements or the measurements of the TARES test for ethical persuasion. We will talk after that about advertising and marketing, and also the interaction between public relations, public relations professionals, and vice versa, and why that relationship is sometimes tense and sometimes mutually beneficial. The next chapter is on loyalty, choosing between competing alliances. We'll talk about Hobbes's Leviathan and the social contract theory, and how the unspoken rules of our society are presented to us through the mass media, and how they influence the social contract that we all live by. And then we will talk about another philosophy in ethics, brought to us by Royce, and that philosophy is ethics hinges on or depends on loyalty, and what's right about Royce's theory and what is negative or what is wrong with Royce's theory, and what's been proven correct and what has been proven incorrect. There are two types of loyalties. We have multiple loyalties, similar to the competing values theory, which you'll read about for Thursday. We have competing loyalties, and how we deal with it. Those loyalties often are uncovered in an ethical decision-making process. We will talk about roles, responsibilities of media professionals, media students, communication professionals through an ethical lens. And again, finally, conflicting loyalties. Then we will have our third tool in our toolbox, which is the Potter Box. And we will walk through how to deploy the Potter Box to help us make consistent ethical decisions. The next chapter is on privacy, looking for solitude in a global village. And do we have real privacy today? The saturation of social media and all of us who depend and use social media every day, and we talk about our lives. We put our pictures up of ourselves and our friends, our selfies, and we talk about or put pictures of the things that we do each weekend on our Facebook pages or on our Instagram stories. And are those our stories, or do we give up the privacy of our lives when we interact on social media? The legal limits of surrounding privacy, the tort of privacy we'll talk about. And another tool is the circles of intimacy and discretion, and how we can deploy those circles of intimacy when we're talking about ethics in the mass media, and how we can talk about privacy, our own privacy, using the circles of intimacy. Another tool is Rawls distributive justice theory, and how we can use that to talk about, as a media professional, as a journalist, as a photojournalist, should we be making private facts or private things about other people public in our work? Then we'll talk about mass media in a democratic society. This is one of my favorite chapters, weeks of the semester, and we'll talk about politics, and we'll talk about the mass media and how we learn about our politicians and leaders, and how we know about the things that are happening in this country, and the role that the mass media plays in our democratic society. Is the media, is mass media the guard dog or the lapdog of our government? And it's really a question that we can debate in class during that week. And then candidates and their character. And then we will take one whole class or a class and a half, and we'll do an in-class exercise about how we learn about our political leaders today. Media economics, another great chapter. The deadline meets the bottom line. A lot of the ethical dilemmas that we face, or that are faced by media professionals, today are have to do with the bottom line, or what is the bottom line? The bottom line is how media companies make money. And so publishers and television producers and TV directors and programmers have to make decisions about what to put on TV, what shows to put in the lineup, and how do they make those decisions. The same is true with movies and music. The recording industry and the film industry, they're interested, they need to make money. And so they need to make decisions that are going to put butts in seats. So they're going to, what people want to watch, and how those decisions can provide ethical dilemmas for the people working in those industries. Finally, we will talk about another mass media theory, the stakeholder and stockholder theory, and how those two theories can help us determine the ethical decisions being made by mass media professionals. We will do a chapter on the ethics of photo and video journalism. Have you got good art, good photos, and video help to tell a story, and how that is at play? What photojournalists decide to shoot or not to shoot, and we'll talk about how photojournalism has changed over the last 30 years with the proliferation of handheld cell phones and the cameras that we use today, and how those can capture video, and that video can be shared virally at a moment's notice. The next chapter is on informing a just society. Social justice can be seen in institutions and individuals, and how the decisions being made by institutions, in this case mass media institutions, influence individuals, impact individuals, all of us in this room today, and we will talk about the things that are not apparent in the messaging, but as you uncover that messaging and think about and discuss that messaging, how that messaging might bias one demographic over another demographic in our society, and does that influence the way we think about social justice, the way we think about fairness in our society. Then we will talk about ethical dimensions in art and entertainment. We will address Plato's philosopher King, and what the downfall of the philosopher King, Tolstoy, high culture and low culture in terms of the mass media that we consume or that we produce on a regular basis, the power of the entertainment media to influence how we look at the world. The next chapter, and the final chapter, is becoming a moral adult. And we'll wrap up the semester. This will be the week before our final exam. We will cover this chapter 11 and next steps in our communication, professional,ism and studies, and where we go from here, and the research and theories of Piaget and Kohlberg and Gilligan, and how those theories and the research that they've conducted influence not only us as individuals, but the people who are producing mass media messages, and we will talk about that from an ethical perspective. In addition to that, so those are the chapters of our textbook. Again, we will start chapter 1 this week. That chapter 1 is then, I have made photocopies available on our Canvas module for this week. You will be asked, or I'm asked now, to download that or read that on your computer between now and Thursday, and be prepared to walk through a presentation, or I will walk through a presentation on Thursday with you on chapter 1, and then we will again break up into groups in our class and talk about the case study that is presented at the end of chapter 1. In addition to the textbook that we will be using throughout the semester, we will read another book called The Trolley Problem, and we will do an in-class exercise on the trolley problem book. That's a fun exercise where we'll get everybody involved, and then we will have a little courtroom, and we will determine whether or not the main character in that book is guilty or not guilty. We will do reading, or you will do I will do a chalk and wire assessment of your ability to read and write on media ethics, and we'll do that around the midterm time of this semester. and we will talk about media literacy and ethics as they relate to our American democracy. And then we will also devote to fake news and social media. So you will have some readings and some podcasts to listen to, and then we will have some planned discussions around those things and the ethical dilemmas facing those. So welcome again to Mass Media at the College of St. Rose. I will be joining you next week, but please prepare the reading by reading for chapter 1 for Thursday, and we will reconvene at 8 a.m. on Thursday, and I look forward to talking with you again then. Thank you.